Well, good evening, and welcome to the Poe Museum. Annabelle Lee and I are just dancing in celebration of the museum's 99th anniversary this year. Why don't you join us? Can you not hear the music playing? It's being performed by Edgar Allan Poe's sister Rosalie on her pianoforte, right back here. And that'll be the subject of tonight's installment of the Curator's Crypt. So this is it, the actual piano that Poe's sister used to play. It was a pretty nice piece, actually made in the mid to late 1830s to 1840s by Dubois, Bacon, and Chambers of New York. Now, have you never heard of Poe's sister? She's right up here. Well, this albumin print carte de visite shows Poe's sister when she's probably in her 50s. And since she only lived to be 63, this is kind of in her later years, probably taken just after the Civil War, when her family fell on hard times and she ended up in a charity home up in Washington, D.C., but I'm getting ahead of myself. Poe only had one sister, one brother. His older brother was William Henry Leonard Poe. He went to live with the grandparents up in Baltimore when the kids were orphaned. Edgar, of course, stayed here in Richmond with the Allens, and his sister also stayed in Richmond with the Mackenzies. And the Mackenzies were probably well off. They were in the insurance business, and they ran a girls' school. And Poe loved that because early on he could use his sister to sneak notes to different girls in the school that he liked. Apparently they really enjoyed the poetry until, of course, they found out he'd sent everybody the same poem. But that's neither here nor there. What do we know about Poe's sister? Well, some of you might have read that there was something off about her, that she was a little bit unusual. She was a strange person, to say the least. We know that she grew up and became a school teacher. She taught art and penmanship. We actually have some examples right here of her handwriting. And when I say she was eccentric, some people thought that she might have some developmental problems, but the people who know her best, her students and her foster family, said no, that she was actually pretty intelligent, just weird. And one of her students said that one day she just saw her staring for hours out the window without blinking and asked her, "What are you thinking about?" She says, "I'm not thinking about anything, I'm just sleeping with my eyes open." There's another instance in which it said that Edgar was giving a performance of The Raven at a private home here in town. At the end of the poem, at the most dramatic part, he sat down, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. And as soon as he sat down, Rosalie just plopped there on her lap. Sure, she's in her 30s at the time, but she must have thought that was a hilarious way to end the poem. And Poe even joked about the time that he should probably bring her along to all of his performances. In addition to her penmanship, she was also an artist. This is a handkerchief case that she painted. You can't see it too well. Whatever the flowers were right here, these have faded off. The pigments that she used faded, but the pigment she used for the leaves has remained. And underneath it, she's reading, "'Twas from love I borrowed you, my sweet perfume, my violet hue." Not her poetry, but still a quote from a popular poem of the time, and implies maybe these were violet before they faded away. We also have another nice piece here. This is her sewing box. Check it out. I have all the little compartments in there, little covers that come off. We got a lot of these items because the Poe Museum was supported from early on by the Mackenzie family that took her in. In fact, some of the earliest members, some of those donors were Mackenzie family members. It's through Mackenzie family members that we got Poe's trunk, for instance. But also painting and furniture from the Mackenzie home where Poe spent a lot of his time. You know, both of his foster parents were dead by the time he was 27. So when he made return visits to Richmond, he wasn't coming back to see the Allens. They were gone. He was coming back to see the Mackenzies. And they said that, he always said that they were more of a family to him than his foster father, Mr. Allen, was. That the Mackenzie brothers, like John Hamilton and Thomas, who were supporters of his throughout his life, really were some of his closest friends. And of course, he had his sister there, that link back to the Mackenzie household. She never married, never had any children. She lived with the Mackenzies for almost the rest of her life. Until, as I mentioned earlier, the Civil War, when things fell on hard times and she shuffled around from one Poe relative to another Mackenzie relative, and finally up to that charity home up in D.C. where she's buried. And if you do have a chance to visit her grave in Washington, D.C., be sure to notice her gravestone. It actually says that she was born in 1812, a full year after her mother died, which makes it a pretty extraordinary birth for such an extraordinary and peculiar woman. But how do we know what kind of music she played? Well, I can answer that for you too. It's right in here. Poe's Sisters music album. Let's take a look. One of the first things you notice is that this isn't filled with melancholy tunes. This is dance music. This is filled with quick steps and waltzes. This is music for people that want to have a good time. And we can imagine that Rosalie Poe must have been the life of the party. And the Mackenzie house was a center of learning, of the arts. There were teachers, after all. They loved visual art and music. They encouraged it amongst their children, and they had a big family. They had about 10 kids. So Rosalie and Edgar are right in the middle of all this. And one of the things I really like about this is sometimes the Mackenzies doodled in it. Way back here. Here's a picture of an ugly old crone, and underneath it they've written beauty. I guess that's their sense of humor. There's another little bit better drawing back here of a woman sitting at a very similar pianoforte with a book of sheet music in front of it. Now, who did this drawing? Was it one of the Mackenzie kids? Was it Rosalie? We can't tell you. But they're pretty interesting little drawings nonetheless, don't you think? So how did this piano get to the Poe Museum? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Poe's sister was in dire straits in the last year of her life, moving from city to city, even selling photographs of her famous brother on street corners just to raise some extra money. Eventually, she moved in with some Mackenzie relatives out in Powhatan County, Virginia. And there, to pay their medical bill, the family gave the doctor her piano. She was furious. Whenever she visited the doctor's house, she would say, "That's my piano. How dare anybody else play my piano?" But that piano and the book of sheet music got passed down through the doctor's family until they finally came to the Poe Museum, where you can see them today. And just imagine the kinds of music that Rosalie must have been playing here while old Eddie was playing the flute, or maybe dancing with some of the Mackenzie girls. You can almost hear the music today. Well, thanks for joining us this week in the Poe Museum's Curator's Crypt. And the party doesn't have to stop here. Why don't you join us by signing up at patreon.com/Poe Museum to support the Poe Museum and get access to all sorts of bonus features, as well as the opportunity to see videos like this a week before anyone else. We'll see you there.